the world of gaming has always been more than mere entertainment. Since the rise of personal computers and the explosion of online multiplayer games in the late 1990s and early 2000s, millions have immersed themselves in digital worlds where strategy, skill, and endurance define success. Internet cafes became cultural hubs in countries like South Korea, China, and Taiwan, places where the young and ambitious would gather to compete, socialize, and test their limits. These virtual arenas mirrored the intensity of traditional sports, demanding focus, stamina, and unrelenting dedication. Yet, unlike physical sports, the stakes were invisible, measured not in scores alone, but in the fragile balance of health, sleep, and human endurance. For some, the pursuit of virtual glory became an all-consuming obsession. Long hours of gameplay, often fueled by energy drinks and instant meals, pushed bodies to extremes that were rarely accounted for by the digital world. The risks were compounded by the culture surrounding competitive gaming. Tournaments with high cash prizes, online rankings that dictated social status, and the constant pressure to outperform peers. Many young gamers, isolated from family and support systems, did not recognize the warning signs of exhaustion, dehydration, or acute stress, believing that each victory brought them closer to recognition and achievement. The tragedies that followed were sudden, shocking, and heartbreaking. In one notable incident, a young South Korean man collapsed in a PC bang after a marathon session of over 50 hours playing StarCraft. Fellow gamers initially thought he was joking or taking a brief nap. By the time they realized the severity, paramedics arrived to find him unresponsive, his body showing signs of extreme dehydration and cardiac strain. The room, once filled with the hum of digital life, became a somber reminder of human vulnerability. Witnesses later described the disbelief and horror that gripped them as they tried to comprehend how a pursuit that seemed so harmless could claim a life in an instant. The aftermath of these incidents resonated far beyond the gaming community. Governments and public health officials began introducing regulations, including mandatory breaks in internet cafes and campaigns to raise awareness about the dangers of prolonged gaming. Online platforms also took steps to implement time limits and alerts to encourage healthier play habits. Memorials and tributes emerged online and in communities where victims were remembered not merely as gamers, but as individuals whose passion, while tragic in consequence, highlighted the urgent need for balance between virtual achievement and real-world well-being. These stories endure as a chilling testament to both human aspiration and fragility, shaping the culture and safety of gaming for generations to come. In the early 2000s, East Asia experienced an unprecedented surge in the popularity of online gaming. South Korea, in particular, became the epicenter of this phenomenon, with 24-hour PC bangs, gaming cafes equipped with high-speed internet and top-of-the-line computers, springing up in every city. These spaces were designed for immersion, offering gamers the ability to play uninterrupted for hours, or even days. Competitive games like StarCraft and later Warcraft Ilthuri dominated the culture, creating communities that celebrated endurance and skill above all else. The pressure to perform was immense as online rankings determined prestige, and tournaments with cash prizes lured young players into marathon sessions that tested the limits of the human body. In a society where success was highly valued, digital achievement became a proxy for status, and the risks of overexertion were largely ignored. One of the most infamous tragedies occurred in 2002 when Lee Sung-sip, a 28-year-old gamer, collapsed in a Seoul PC bang after an unbroken 50-hour session of StarCraft. Lee had arrived on a Friday evening, armed with energy drinks, instant noodles, and a determination to climb the online rankings. Friends and fellow gamers observed him through the night, initially admiring his focus and stamina. But as hours turned into days, his movements slowed, his skin grew pale, and he began showing signs of severe fatigue. By Saturday afternoon, his posture slumped and his breathing became irregular. Fellow players assumed he was merely resting, unaware of the silent danger building within him. Paramedics later reported that Lee had succumbed to acute heart failure, exacerbated by dehydration, sleep deprivation, and a lack of proper nutrition. The Cafe A, once buzzing with the sound of clicks and keystrokes, fell into a stunned silence as reality set in. A life had been lost to a passion that had consumed him entirely. Lee's death was not an isolated incident. Across East Asia, similar tragedies began to emerge, exposing a disturbing pattern of fatalities tied to prolonged gaming. In China, where online games like World of Warcraft and League of Legends dominated youth culture, reports surfaced of young men collapsing after marathon sessions that lasted anywhere from 12 to 48 hours. In 2005, a 23-year-old gamer reportedly died after 19 hours of uninterrupted gameplay, leaving behind an unfinished online raid and a community paralyzed with grief. Friends and bystanders often describe the eerie normalcy of these deaths. One moment, the gamer was engaged and animated, the next, unresponsive, with their bodies bearing the silent consequences of overexertion. Medical examinations consistently cited cardiac arrest, dehydration, and multi-organ failure as primary causes, painting a grim picture of the physical toll exacted by extreme gaming. The impact of these tragedies rippled beyond individual families and local communities. Governments and public health organizations recognized the urgent need for intervention. In South Korea, campaigns were launched to regulate playtime, especially for minors, and to educate the public about the dangers of sleep deprivation and poor nutrition. Cyber cafes implemented mandatory breaks and monitoring systems, while gaming companies introduced features such as time alerts and enforced logout periods. Memorials for victims appeared online, where fellow gamers could pay tribute to friends lost to the pursuit of digital achievement. These incidents served as a somber reminder that even virtual worlds, seemingly safe and controlled, could harbor deadly consequences when human limits were ignored, forever shaping the culture of competitive gaming across the globe. In the digital age, gaming has evolved from a casual pastime into a global phenomenon that can dominate daily life. By the late 2010s, online multiplayer games had become deeply immersive, connecting millions of players worldwide in persistent virtual worlds. Games like Final Fantasy XIV, League of Legends, and Apex Legends offered complex social ecosystems, high-stakes competition, and continual rewards that encouraged prolonged engagement. With this growth, a darker side of gaming emerged: addiction. In 2018, the World Health Organization formally recognized gaming disorder as a mental health condition, acknowledging that excessive gaming could disrupt sleep, nutrition, relationships, and mental stability. Experts warned that the thrill of virtual achievement could overshadow basic human needs, creating conditions where obsession became life-threatening. The tragic case of a 32-year-old Japanese man, known only as Takashi, illustrates the lethal potential of gaming addiction. Takashi, a software engineer living in Tokyo, had been deeply engrossed in an online multiplayer game that required continuous participation to maintain rankings and in-game status. Over a period of 3 days, he isolated himself completely in his small apartment, surviving only on energy drinks and vending machine snacks. Friends and colleagues reported difficulty contacting him, but like many gamers experiencing extreme immersion, he ignored messages and calls. By the end of the 3rd day, neighbors noticed an unsettling silence and unusual smells emanating from his apartment, prompting authorities to check on him. Paramedics discovered Takashi unresponsive, slumped over his keyboard. Medical reports indicated severe dehydration, electrolyte imbalance, and cardiac arrest. His death was immediate yet horrifyingly preventable, highlighting the invisible dangers of prolonged gaming addiction. The physiological toll of such marathon gaming sessions is severe. Extended periods of intense focus without rest trigger a cascade of stress responses in the body. Cortisol levels rise, heart rhythms become irregular, and lactic acid builds up in muscles, contributing to fatigue and, in extreme cases, organ failure. Coupled with prolonged sitting, dehydration, and minimal caloric intake, these conditions can culminate in sudden collapse or fatal cardiac events. Social isolation compounds the risk. Gamers like Takashi often withdraw from friends and family, losing external checks that might signal the need for help. In moments of crisis, those around them are too far removed to intervene, leaving the individual trapped in a cycle of obsession that can prove deadly. The aftermath of Takashi's death resonated across Japan and the global gaming community. Mental health professionals and gaming advocates amplified calls for awareness and prevention. Online communities began sharing information about recognizing warning signs of gaming addiction, and some developers introduced features to encourage breaks, promote hydration, and limit continuous play. In Japanese media, Takashi's story was cited as a cautionary tale, a stark example of the consequences of prioritizing virtual success over physical well-being. Memorial pages and online tributes preserved his memory, framing him not just as a victim of addiction, but as a reflection of the pressures and immersive pull of modern gaming culture. These tragedies reshaped public perception of gaming, reinforcing the critical importance of moderation, self-care, and community vigilance in a world increasingly defined by digital connection. By the mid-2010s, gaming had grown from a pastime into a global cultural force, with competitive online games drawing millions into prolonged, immersive sessions. In East Asia, cyber cafes, high-tech hubs of intense digital competition, had become as much workplaces as entertainment spaces, designed for endurance and uninterrupted play. Games like Crossfire, League of Legends, and World of Warcraft demanded hours of focused attention, often under dim lighting, with minimal breaks. The culture around competitive gaming prized stamina, resilience, and constant connectivity, but little attention was paid to the physical hazards of prolonged sedentary behavior. The human body, adapted for movement and regular circulation, faced serious consequences when constrained for hours in one position, consuming only caffeinated beverages or processed snacks. In 2016, these dangers were tragically illustrated by the death of a 35-year-old man in China who had been playing Crossfire for over 20 hours in a local cyber cafe. According to eyewitness accounts, he arrived in the evening, intent on completing a high-stakes-in-game mission. Initially energetic and focused, his posture gradually slumped as the night wore on. Friends in the cafe noticed his increasing pallor, sluggish movements, and occasional hand cramps, warning him to take breaks or stretch, but he brushed off their concerns, determined to maintain his streak. By the early morning hours, he had become unresponsive, slumped in his chair, unnoticed by some of the other players who were absorbed in their own games. When staff realized the severity of the situation, paramedics were called. Despite immediate medical attention, doctors confirmed he had suffered fatal deep vein thrombosis, a condition exacerbated by prolonged immobility that had triggered a sudden pulmonary embolism. The scene was surreal. A room, once filled with clicks, chatter, and digital camaraderie, fell silent, overshadowed by grief and disbelief. Medical experts explain that sitting motionless for extended periods drastically increases the risk of blood clots, particularly in the legs. When a clot dislodges, it can travel to the lungs, heart, or brain, causing sudden death. For many gamers, the signs, swelling, cramps, fatigue, are easy to dismiss, especially when adrenaline, focus, and social pressure reinforce the drive to continue playing. Combined with poor hydration, energy drinks, and irregular nutrition, the physiological risks escalate, creating a hidden danger that lurks behind screens and glowing monitors. The tragedy in the cyber cafe illustrated that the consequences of extreme gaming extend beyond mental and emotional strain, impacting the very mechanics of the human body. The aftermath of this incident prompted a broader public awareness campaign in China and neighboring countries. Cyber cafe operators began enforcing mandatory breaks, adding signage to encourage movement, hydration, and proper posture. Health organizations issued warnings about the dangers of long gaming sessions, educating both players and families about early signs of thrombosis and other physical complications. Online communities shared tributes and cautionary stories, commemorating the man while emphasizing safer gaming habits. His death became a stark reminder that even a sedentary hobby, seemingly safe and controlled, could carry life-threatening risks when taken to extremes. These incidents reshaped attitudes toward gaming culture, reinforcing the need for balance, personal responsibility, and vigilance, both for individual health and community awareness. By the mid-2000s, online gaming had transformed from a hobby into a social ecosystem, offering both connection and competition. For many players, these digital worlds provided an escape from the pressures of everyday life, creating spaces where skill and perseverance were recognized and rewarded. In regions like East Asia, this immersion often came at the cost of physical and social well-being. Internet cafes and private gaming setups became arenas of intense rivalry, but they were also places of isolation. Behind the thrill of achievement lurked the quiet struggle of players battling loneliness, mental fatigue, and the unrelenting pressure to perform. The stories of those lost to gaming are reminders that these challenges were not just personal. They reflected broader societal and cultural dynamics that valued success and status, even in virtual realms. One of the most harrowing examples comes from Taiwan in 2005. A man known online as Longer had dedicated months of his life to climbing competitive rankings in multiplayer tournaments. His apartment, sparsely furnished and dimly lit, had become both a home and a battleground. Neighbors reported that he rarely left his room, subsisting on instant noodles and energy drinks, immersed in a cycle of endless matches and leaderboard tracking. Over time, the isolation intensified. Friends who attempted to check on him were often ignored, and the digital world became his primary source of identity and validation. On the day of his death, he had been participating in an online tournament for several consecutive hours. Fellow competitors and neighbors initially assumed he had taken a short break, but when he failed to respond to messages and did not appear online the following day, concern escalated. By the time authorities entered his apartment, Longer had passed away, the result of prolonged physical neglect compounded by exhaustion and chronic sleep deprivation. The discovery shocked the gaming community and the nation, sparking urgent conversations about the intersection of mental health, social isolation, and compulsive gaming. The dangers of such extreme immersion are not confined to East Asia. In 2018, an American teenager collapsed during an all-night Fortnite marathon at a friend's house. Like Longer, he had been engrossed in competitive play, encouraged by social pressure, high-stakes online rankings, and the communal thrill of late-night sessions with friends. Coroners concluded that cardiac arrest, exacerbated by pre-existing health conditions, dehydration, and sleep deprivation, caused his death. Witnesses recounted the immediate panic and fear when he became unresponsive, highlighting the sudden vulnerability that can accompany even familiar environments when the body is pushed beyond its limits. Friends and family were left grappling with grief, confusion, and guilt, questioning what signs had been missed and what could have been done to prevent the tragedy. These incidents illuminated the deep emotional and social factors underpinning gaming-related fatalities. Loneliness, the pressure to succeed, and the addictive mechanics of competitive games created a dangerous feedback loop, often leaving individuals isolated at critical moments. In response, mental health organizations and online platforms began to emphasize the importance of community support, balance, and self-care. Campaigns were launched to educate families and peers on recognizing warning signs of compulsive gaming, while developers experimented with features encouraging breaks and social interaction outside the game. Memorials and online tributes emerged, honoring those lost while educating others about the hidden emotional and social perils of extreme gaming. These stories serve as a stark reminder that behind every statistic is a human life shaped by ambition, isolation, and the relentless pull of virtual worlds. By the late 2010s, gaming had firmly established itself as one of the most influential cultural phenomena worldwide. Online multiplayer games, streaming platforms, and esports competitions created communities numbering in the millions, blending social interaction with competitive intensity. Yet, as the medium evolved, so too did the risks associated with prolonged, unmoderated engagement. Stories of deaths caused by exhaustion, dehydration, or prolonged sedentary behavior became grim markers of the hidden dangers within these immersive digital worlds. While gaming could provide connection, entertainment, and even career opportunities, the incidence of marathon sessions and obsessive play highlighted a stark reality. Human limits cannot be overridden by virtual achievement. These tragedies forced both the public and policymakers to confront the consequences of unregulated engagement in the digital age. The cumulative impact of these events was visible in both societal attitudes and regulatory measures. In South Korea, government initiatives encouraged internet cafes to enforce mandatory rest periods and limit access for minors during late night hours. Gaming companies began experimenting with in-game notifications and automatic session interruptions designed to prompt players to take breaks or hydrate. In China, awareness campaigns targeted parents and guardians, highlighting the physical and mental health risks of long gaming sessions, including cardiac arrest, deep vein thrombosis, and chronic sleep deprivation. Across Japan and Taiwan, media coverage of individual deaths, like those of Takashi and Longer, brought national attention to the psychological and social pressures surrounding competitive gaming, inspiring dialogue about the intersection of technology, health, and responsibility. For the families and communities affected, these deaths were deeply personal and devastating. Friends who had shared the thrill of competition or casual play were left with grief, guilt, and haunting what-ifs. Local gaming communities responded by creating memorials, both physical and digital, honoring those lost and advocating for safer practices. In some cases, former players became vocal advocates for balanced gaming habits, sharing first-hand accounts of the pressures, obsession, and social isolation that had contributed to these tragedies. These stories underscored the human cost behind each statistic and reinforced the need for proactive intervention before tragedy strikes. On a broader scale, the gaming industry and public health officials recognized the importance of education alongside regulation. Programs were developed to teach children and young adults about healthy play habits, the importance of sleep, proper nutrition, and social engagement beyond screens. Esports organizations incorporated wellness protocols for professional players, including monitored play hours, physical exercise, and mental health support. Online communities began to shift culture away from unrelenting grind and towards balance, understanding that sustained achievement in virtual worlds should not come at the expense of physical or mental health. Ultimately, these tragedies serve as sobering reminders that passion, when unchecked, can become perilous. The legacy of those who lost their lives to gaming addiction, marathon play, or isolation is one of caution, reflection, and reform. Their stories catalyzed systemic changes in policy, technology, and culture, encouraging both developers and players to prioritize safety, mindfulness, and human well-being. In a world increasingly defined by digital connection, these lessons endure joy and escape must always be balanced with health and responsibility, and the human cost of obsession must never be forgotten. As the glow of monitors fades and the digital world powers down, we are reminded that gaming is far more than pixels and points. Since the late 20th century, games have evolved from simple, solitary experiences into complex virtual ecosystems connecting millions across continents. Online multiplayer games, competitive esports, and immersive digital worlds have created unprecedented opportunities for collaboration, creativity, and achievement. Players can build friendships, explore intricate narratives, and challenge themselves in ways that were once unimaginable. Yet, as these virtual spaces have grown in intensity and accessibility, so too have the stakes for human health and well-being. The incidents we've recounted, from marathon sessions in South Korea and China to tragic cases in Japan, Taiwan, and the United States, serve as stark reminders that passion, when unchecked, can carry unforeseen consequences. The stories of Lee Sung, Seep, Takashi, Longer, and countless others reflect not only individual loss, but also the pressures of modern gaming culture. In competitive arenas, the drive to succeed can become all-consuming, magnified by social expectation, online prestige, and the immersive design of the games themselves. These deaths were often sudden, shocking, and preventable. Friends and family recall the fear, disbelief, and grief in moments when a loved one, once vibrant and engaged, was found unresponsive after long hours of play. Witnesses describe the surreal transition from the ordinary, clicking keyboards, animated discussions, and communal excitement, to the extraordinary sorrow of realizing that obsession had silently claimed a life. These human stories remind us that behind every statistic is a person whose life, dreams, and potential were abruptly cut short. The aftermath of these tragedies has been far-reaching. Governments, health organizations, and gaming platforms have recognized the critical need for proactive measures. South Korea and China introduced regulations for mandatory breaks in internet cafes, time limits for minors, and public awareness campaigns about sleep, nutrition, and hydration. Online platforms began implementing prompts to encourage pauses and promote healthy play patterns, while parents, educators, and communities have become more vigilant about the warning signs of excessive gaming. Mental health initiatives emphasize moderation and balance, addressing social isolation and the psychological pressures of competitive play. These changes, while prompted by tragedy, have saved countless lives and reshaped gaming culture, fostering environments where enjoyment does not come at the expense of well-being. As we look to the future, gaming remains a source of connection, joy, and personal growth. Millions continue to explore its world safely, forging friendships, honing skills, and finding fulfillment. Yet the lessons of those we've lost endure. The thrill of achievement must always be balanced with care, self-awareness, and compassion for oneself and others. Moderation, mindful play, and attention to physical and mental health are not limitations. They are safeguards that preserve both the experiences we cherish and the lives we hold dear. Gaming, at its best, is a celebration of human ingenuity, community, and imagination. But it is also a reminder that life, unlike a game, is irreplaceable. The tragedies recounted here call us to pause, reflect, and honor the fragility of existence. They teach us that the greatest victories are not measured by rankings or achievements on a screen, but by the lives we protect and the connections we nurture on, screen, and off.